pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Echo Delta nominal.
Flight downside, speed off. Bring in, speed off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Hello and welcome to Boca Chica, where it looks like we might get to see Booster 4 fly again. And we thought that would be a good time to do a commentated stream, take some questions, hang out a little bit, watch the views down in Boca Chica. I'm Stephen Marr. I'm one of the photographers around these parts, and I'm joined today by our assistant managing editor, Chris Gebhardt. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing just fine. How about yourself, Stephen?
Doing well, and we're also joined by Adrian Beal, one of our writers around here. How you doing, Adrian?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Well, here we are, everybody. Hopefully, we're going to see Booster 4 fly a little bit. We did get a notification from one of our photographers down there. Nick Answeeney said that he heard the PA announcement that the lift should be happening soon. We've seen workers around the base of the booster, so it should be happening here pretty shortly. And we also, if you were watching Starbase Live, you saw a couple of tanks roll down Highway 4 towards the launch site. What's going on with that? What are our ideas there? What do you think, Chris?
Oh, yes.
We were discussing what these tanks might even hold. Like we're not even sure what they're going to hold. They look like the liquid nitrogen tanks that you see over there at the production site. But
Yes.
they are not, or we don't know.
I don't believe we know exactly what they are. They're definitely part of the fuel farm. And remember, one of the things that's cool with the fuel farm too, right, is we know it could potentially, it could be nitrogen, it could be for gaseous methane, because the recondenser uses gaseous methane to turn it into liquid. So we could have, there could be things there. What I think is the more important element for these tanks arriving at the production at the launch site right now is that's continued build up out for the tank farm and the fuel farm that's needed here. And this is, of course, one of those big crucial steps to getting Starship to the point where it can be fueled and it can be filled with all of the wonderful, wonderful drinks that it needs of liquid methane and liquid oxygen. So it's good to see. But yeah, what these specific tanks are going to hold, we're not entirely sure just yet.
Yeah, we'll find out. It looks like there's a couple of cranes hooked up to it. I can't tell if the one on the right. Actually, no. It looks like the what do we call that? The squid. It's hanging down there. Yeah. It looks like they are in the process, maybe, of attaching that.
It looks like the left crane, the yellow and black one, is already attached to the first tank, and the right one, the red one, there is getting attached as well. So they have it stable while lifting it, because you really don't want to lift one of these horizontal tanks with only one crane attached in the middle.
Yeah.
And why would that be, Adrian?
Because
Physics.
then you would physics. No, I think it would be because the center of mass could not be below the lifting point anymore, and the whole thing could flip.
Yeah.
Safety first. And
You don't want to
looks-
have a 15 meters high tank spinning around.
Right. Especially while they're possibly going to be lifting a massive booster off the stand. You've got a tank swinging around. You don't want that. Now, I think, Adrian, you were counting how many people we had up there on the orbital launch mount. What are we sitting at now?
We are sitting at right now at, if my count is correct, we are sitting right now at 11. We were at 12, I think, a few minutes ago, but then one person went down again. Yeah, we should be at 11 people around the booster right now, sitting there waiting for the lift, and maybe looking at the booster while it's going up, checking if it is hitting something that it shouldn't hit, and also making sure the lift is going well from that view.
Yeah, and they're in constant contact with the crane driver, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I like
for
that
sure.
crane driver. Yes.
what? Oh, crane operator. I guess is probably what you should say.
I truly like driving. I'm not saying that to like dig at you or anything. I kind of like that too. It was like yesterday someone asked me on Twitter. They were like, "Wait a minute, I don't know what you call the closest point of an orbit around Mercury, paramerc?" And I was like, "Oh, I really like that, but no."
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's
Do you
parahermian in
call
case
it?
anyone's wondering. It's
Uh,
parahermian.
Thank you.
Parahermian.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh
Which you would never guess. So it was a valid
no.
question. But anyway, Booster 4. Yes.
Booster 4 is here, and actually one of the questions, in the lead up to actually going live, I noticed a lot of people were asking, and so I just grabbed one of them. Gamer Boss 889, why is it lifting off the orbital launch mount? What do we think? Do we know?
Yeah, this is
The-
kind of interesting, right, Adrian?
Yeah, the unsatisfying answer is we don't know for sure, as it's often with Baka operations. But there's a good speculation in the forum of another spaceflight going on that this might be to remove the booster from the pad so they have space to install the chopsticks, the Mechazilla arms, onto the tower and basically clear the area that they would need to lift them and install them.
It would kind of make sense too, right? Because like your attach points might be hinged at first, right? Like I mean, like obviously there are multiple ways you can attach arms to towers, right? But like it kind of makes sense to me that you would want to remove the booster because like these arms have to move. They have to hinge backward and forward on their hydraulic systems or their electric systems, however exactly it's going to be used. At SpaceX, probably electric, but it would make sense, right? That there are pins, so you want to give as much clearance as you can for those arms, especially if they swing. And this is a flight booster. This isn't a piece of test hardware anymore, like a purpose-built ground test hardware unit, right? This is the one that's going to fly, hopefully here with the first orbital stack. So yeah, it would make sense that that's what it is.
Yeah, because those chopsticks are big, and they're probably going to be swinging around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've seen Frankencrane like lift a lot of things, so like it doesn't need to do lifting day at the gym anymore, just with the booster, right? So yeah, probably the tower. But you can also see here, this is kind of interesting, right? The COPVs have covers on them now. Like it looks like they've got like plastic covers over them while it's been out at the pad.
Well, you just took Caleb.
Oh, did I?
To say last name. Yeah, there you go. There's a question here. I'll throw that up on the screen.
It also looks like the left one is already loose.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's another purpose, but I assumed when I first saw those going on, it's just sort of weather protection, right?
Yeah,
That's what I would assume. Yeah.
So there you go, Caleb. It's just keeping some of the. Of course, they're right there. I mean, you may not realize how close the launch site is to the beach. It's maybe a couple hundred yards in American, a couple hundred meters from the sand, and there's dunes and everything. The wind's blowing constantly, so there's a concern for making sure that you're not getting debris and all of your high-tech equipment, I would guess. And then of course rain and whatnot.
You also have the issue with corrosion at saltwater, right? Mm-hmm. That saltwater causes corrosion at important parts of the rocket.
Right. Let's see. Little Crutch Tech says, do you think they'll install the chopsticks before or after the first orbital launch? Well,
first.
we sort of, we sort of just talked about that.
Now it does. Now there are a couple things that I think are worth stopping here and talking about, Stephen and Adrian, because I think the biggest point is that I would like to make is that the arms are going on the tower, but per the environmental assessment that we saw, they're not going to be used for the first flight. And we know this for a couple of reasons, right? Like the environmental impact, the environmental assessment actually says like that booster landings are not going to start right away. This sort of matches what Elon has said. It matches the flight profile so far that we have for the first orbital attempt, which will involve ditching the booster into the Gulf of Mexico after it does a boost back burn and practices how it would land near the tower, but will be like 20 kilometers or so offshore. And then the Starship will be expended into the Pacific Ocean part of that. The ship part of Starship will be extended into the Pacific. So we're not expecting these arms to be used on the first flight. So that's a good sort of caveat, I think, there of like how they're preparing for the next round of testing, but we're not expecting the arms to feature in the first flight, even though they'll be on the tower. Now, does that mean we won't see them test the arms? Maybe, but they could also test them just to make sure. And sort of go through the process, right? Of like, how would you operate them? Like making sure they work. But yeah, don't expect the booster to be caught by these on the first attempt on their flight. Yeah.
Aren't these also planned to be used for lifting?
Yes.
So of course, it could be. Maybe they will test it with a ship.
I know. Like, I'm glad you said that because I was like, I gotta want to say that. Yeah, that they could, right? I mean, it depends on how built out the arms are and how built out their systems are, how built out That's actually a good question, Adrian. I want to step back and stop about this. Have we heard whether these are going to be electric battery driven like a lot of the other stuff is out there given Tesla and SpaceX's synergy, or are these going to be hydraulically controlled arms? Do we know yet?
I do not think we know yet.
Okay.
At least I have not heard.
Yeah, I haven't either exactly what they're going for on those particular ones. But yeah, they could, depending on how outfitted they are, they could seek to test them by having them lift Booster 4 back onto the pad. It's sort of like that interesting thing where as the longer we go into the process of getting ready for the first orbital flight, the more SpaceX builds out the area, the more that could potentially be there to say, hey, like if we're not ready to do the orbital test yet, we have time to test this, right? So the whole flow toward this first flight is going to be really interesting because it can just keep changing because it's SpaceX. So now they want to take the booster off the stand for some reason, probably to put the arms on. Great, now they can do that.
Yeah,
things
change a lot.
More of the things change a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the thing with Boca testing, that sometimes you really expect a vehicle or a certain thing to do something. For example, right now we expect Booster 4 and Ship 20 to do the first orbital launch. But even that is not set in stone forever. We saw them changing around vehicle purposes as well. So they are really moving in a way where they can change everything if they need to, and if they see an advantage in changing that particular thing. So nothing is set in stone here.
Yeah, it still has to go through the cryo test, and if they find some problem with this particular booster, and you know that they have Booster 5 in works in the high bay.
It'll be neat too to see the propellant system farm, like you were just saying, right? Like when they do the cryo tests, when they do those various things, it will be interesting to see them not just finding potential issues with the booster, but also with the fuel farm, right? And how the fuel farm might need some care as they're getting it up and running and activated.
I see. I've got some questions queued up, but I don't want to get too far behind on our super chats. We really appreciate all the help y'all throw towards us. Conservative Space Nerd just coming in with a cool $20. Appreciate that. Nathan Friedman, can you speculate on the new steel tube seen erected in the high bay?
The new steel tube erected in the high bay.
We're talking about Booster 5?
Yeah.
That's what, I think maybe. That's what that is, you know. Maybe there's, is there something else that we're missing here? Another steel tube in there? Because we're down to our last GSE tank, right? GSE 8 was the last one they needed to build. So are they working on it?
Now, now
or is Nathan just messing with us?
Well, so I know Adrian's going off looking for this steel tube. To see what he can see. One thing that I would say is like steel tubes. I mean, steel tubes. These could be downcomers and propellant lines that are being prepared for future boosters and future builds. These could be tests that they're doing of potential new welds, new manufacturing processes. We have seen things things appear at the production site, I should say, that were there for a very short amount of times. Like they were just testing something and going on. So it's possible that it's part of a test. It's possible it's part of a different booster. Unfortunately, I think the issue we're running into here on air is that steel tube could mean a lot of different things.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it now.
So I'm so
Yeah.
hesitant to say what it is because yeah, Adrian, what were you saying?
Look at the channel. There's a picture of it. That is what it was meant, and it looks like it's some sort
yes,
of steel tube. I'm looking right now for a link, so we can show it on.
That could be that. Yeah, I mean,
there we go.
But it's in front of the high bay. It could be something to do with propellant transfers, propellant fueling, different lines they might be running out there. That's a really good question. I am looking at what it is right now. It's not obvious. It's a good question.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is though. Now, one thing I will say, like we have seen, right, like there's propellant production facilities. There's a bunch of stuff out there that does need like cross-country propellant lines is what they're called, to take propellants, to take commodities around to different areas, around the launch site, around the whole operation. So that could be one of the things that it is. I mean, that looks really big to be a fuel downcomer for
Yeah, it's a little too thick for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw someone joking around Twitter saying Starship is fulfilling its prophecy as a shuttle successor, and this is the first SRB. But well, of course it's not. It's not.
That's pretty funny. I like that.
Oh, that would look so awesome.
Yeah.
Pasted on the side of the booster. Oh man, it looked like a shiny Delta IV medium.
Now the other thing that I do want to point out too is we do have something else with Starship and its tower, right, to talk about here, because the way that the upper stage ship, Starship, I'm going to use those interchangeably when I talk about the second stage of this vehicle. But we do know that it has its own fueling arm, right, that comes out from the tower to attach to it to allow for the propellants and the commodities to be flowed into the ship portion of Starship. So you have to get that propellant up the tower. So this could also be a fuel filling line for the tower. If we, so there are a lot of things that pipe could be. Yeah.
A lot of reasons to have steel tubes when you're building rockets.
Yeah, and what makes this really kind of hard to even hypothesize what it is because they're building so many things out of the same materials now, right? Like the commodity tanks are built out of the steel, like Starship tanks are. Starship tanks are built out of steel. Whatever this is being built out. Like, so much of it is steel that when we say, "Oh, steel tube,"
Which one?
Yeah. All right.
but that's a really good question. Yeah, really good question, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. And Lars Larson, let's see. I've seen in the daily video nitrogen trucks at the propellant production site. Is nitrogen produced there now? I think they're working on it. Have they made it to the point where they can actually produce the nitrogen over there?
I'm not even sure if I know for sure.
I remember seeing people up there on that white tower working on it.
They've definitely been working on it, and we know it's an integral part for how Starbase will operate in terms of how they condense oxygen and everything, and the other propellants commodities that they'll need.
Yeah.
Possible.
When I was there a couple weeks ago, every day I was seeing nitrogen trucks show up and unload nitrogen. I guess there could be like an interim period where they still need shipments, but they're also producing nitrogen, but they're not producing it at a rate that they don't need shipments. Unless they've developed that in the last couple of weeks. But while I was there, there were multiple trucks per day just that I saw delivering the nitrogen.
I had this realization moment the other day when I was looking at the booster and the tank farm was like, yeah, a couple of trucks will do that. And then I saw this tiny little truck right in front of the tank farm. I was like, oh, that's one truck. That they will need a lot of that.
Yeah.
And that's a moment of scale where you're like, oh no, one truck will not cut it. Not even 5.
Yeah, they actually had me hoping that the cryo test might happen while I was there, because there was one day that I saw 3 trucks, and that's, I'm always assuming that I probably missed some, going down to the launch site, seeing what's going on there, but they were definitely delivering a lot, and I was hoping while I was there I'd get to see a cryo test, but no.
I mean, nitrogen would make sense, right, for them to be producing as one of the first commodities out there, because it's so versatile in what it can do, right? It's an inert gas, which makes it very usable in this industry, especially in spaceflight, because you can use it to inert propellant lines after fueling is done, so you don't have accidental explosions or ignitions of propellant as arms are separating away from the vehicles and everything, or at engine start. It can be used as a shielding gas, which we've seen to help provide some cryogenic conditions. So it's really useful. So it would make sense that nitrogen would be something that they'd want to produce there.
Yeah.
Because of the sheer amount of it that they use and need.
Alrighty, Josh Wilson, what is the large tower for, and why aren't there 4 of them?
Oh my god.
Yes, who wants to take this? Adrian, do you want to take it, or do you want me?
Go ahead. I think this is your ballpark.
Okay. All right. The tower is, well, we think it will actually be what this joke is headed for. Anyway, there were plans, the last we saw, that there will be a lightning mast on the top of this tower. So it will, in some way, function as part of the lightning protection system, not just for the rocket, but for the ground infrastructure that's there at Boca. Now, do they absolutely need a lightning mast? They're putting it there, so that would seem to indicate yes. Now, we've also seen Starship boosters get struck by lightning and be tested and be totally fine and seem to be totally unfazed by it. That's part of the goal of Starship, right? Like, airplanes can handle getting struck by lightning when they're taking off and landing, and they're absolutely fine. That's a goal we want to get to with rocketry, right? So, at least in the United States, I know a lot of people are saying, but in Russia, and that's true, in Russia they just go, and sometimes the Soyuz gets struck by lightning. But yeah, so it will, per our current understanding, it will have a lightning mast on top of it, so it will serve as a lightning protection tower to some degree, which is the why aren't there 4 of them part of the joke, because most light launch pads have 2, 3, or most of them have 4 lightning masts and lightning towers around them. However, the tower is much, 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 much more than that here at Starbase. It's the integration tower, it's the catch tower for the boosters and the ships when they come in to land, eventually down the road. It's the fueling tower, it's the crew access tower, it's the tower you're probably going to use at some point for payload installation. Probably, maybe. We'll have to see how payload installation works, but if you have to install the payload after Starship is already stacked, again, if you have to install the payload to Starship after the ship is already stacked with the booster, then you might need the tower for some integration ops with the payload. So it is a very, very versatile tower, and it's just kind of one tower that does it all at Boca.
And it at night it feels kind of alive. It's pretty cool because if you're there at the launch site, you'll see sparks coming off of it from workers up there welding and cutting and doing whatever they're doing. It's pretty cool to see in person. You just see sparks flying off the top of the tower. And very cool sight. Let's see. We have a new member, Paul Kelly. Thank you for that ongoing support, helping us keep the lights on. Cody Coker, any idea how fast the arms will be able to move? Vertically, rotationally?
They have to at least be pretty fast because they want to catch a booster with that. So they have to have the ability to move in such a way that they can at least adjust for the booster probably coming in. So they can't be super slow. but we don't know any specifics how fast they will move.
Right, and that's what the pulley system at the top is gonna be what raises and lowers it, right? Is that right? The part that sticks out from the very top of the tower? Or am I completely misunderstanding the purpose of that thing? Because that's when that went up there, I was like,
so.
oh, I see the pulley, and so what's it going to be doing? And I just figure, the catch arms will be underneath that, and that pulley will raise and lower where the catch arms are.
Yeah, and they also probably will move them sideways as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so simplicity is best. Like you guys said, right? We know they have to move up and down the tower. We know they have to kind of move around the tower too, because the booster will be caught on the side of the tower, and then the arms will have to rotate the booster around to place it back on the stand. Again, this kind of goes back to my question, right? Of like, are the arms hydraulic? Are they electric? How does that work? The simplest you can make it, the better. And actually, in terms of swing arms, the SLS vehicle swing arms, right, are massively simplified from swing arms of the past that NASA has used. And they actually do use a system of levers and pulleys to disconnect the umbilicals before hydraulics then move the arm back against the tower for liftoff. So pulleys and levers are still very much used to disconnect and move arms around on launch towers. So it wouldn't surprise me. The simplest you can make it, the better, because you're removing potential points of failure.
Right.
Also,
James.
sorry. Also, you're not
Yeah.
using pyrotechnic, so pyrotechnic always has the disadvantage that you need to replace it if it's getting used once, most of the times. So,
yeah, and pyrotechnics it's always that, oh my gosh, are you going to separate? Like, yeah, the more we can get rid of pyrotechnics is the better. Which is part of what they're doing on Starship as well. I mean, the Falcon 9 separate with spring releases, right, between their stages, but they're not even talking about that on Starship. They're literally just talking about imparting a bit of a pitch rotation into the vehicle using either the cold gas thrusters, tank venting on the booster, or like gimbaling an engine really, really small, really quick right at booster engine cutoff to basically start to flip the stack like Starlinks, right? So that when the stages separate, they just kind of boop, bop off of each other like a deck of cards, and then off they go on their own separate ways. And that's really simple, right? You're eliminating pushing systems, you're eliminating pyrotechnics, you're just making it more and more likely from a percentage standpoint that everything will work as designed. So getting rid of pyrotechnics is a good thing.
Yeah, you can only test them once, and then you cannot use them.
And that's it. You can't really test them.
Yeah, you can't test the specific one that you're going to use. You can test others that are like it.
Right. I mean, this is kind of those things, right? Like, hey, like you get this in spaceflight sometimes where like you can't test it till you fly it, and the more you can eliminate that from your design, the better.
Yeah. This is an interesting question. A little like a lightning round, I guess. James Juries wants to know the origin on every line / call out in the intro. Quick go. You have 3 minutes. But in all seriousness, I love you guys.
Oh, God. I got
Say that
first
again?
the one from. You mean like every line in the intro that is said and where it's coming from?
You mean
Yeah.
our intro? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, our intro. Yeah.
No.
It comes from many, many, many missions. Off the top of my head, well, so the Yikes You Bet Concur is from the flight director's loop, audio loop on the STS-93 launch of Shuttle Columbia, when there was a liquid oxygen low-level engine cutoff a fraction of a second before the engines were actually supposed to turn off on that flight. So that's where Yikes You Bet Concur comes from. Tango Delta Nominal comes from Perseverance's landing. That's the code that flight controllers use. Tango Delta Touchdown is the code that they use for that. Water Towers Can Fly is Tim Dodd, I believe.
Yeah,
That's what
absolutely.
I know off the top of that. That's who I know. That's what I know off the top of my head for where they all come from. Yeah, I know there are more.
Yeah, there's more. Well, thanks, James. That's a good question. little trivia. And then just a couple more super chats. No name, just a emoji face there. And then Bryce says, always love the coverage. Any recommendations for someone visiting Starbase for the first time? Now, are we talking about like restaurant recommendations? 'Cause I don't know.
Right?
Or we just, I
There's
mean,
this launch
just,
site you should watch.
yeah,
Because I
you
was gonna
should,
say, because there's an In-N-Out in Houston you should hit before you come down. No,
that's right.
for food. My honest advice, try and be there for a day or more, because it's overwhelming at first.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not
Take,
going to see it all in one day.
yeah, like, yeah, and take the pictures you want to take, but don't glue your eye to the camera shutter. Um, Experience it. Like, just take a few moments to just look with your own eyes, because the thing I always hear, and the thing that's true for me too, with any of these types of events, whether it's SpaceX or anyone else in the industry, the things I end up remembering years later are the things I saw and took a moment to watch with my own eyes. I don't remember looking through what I saw looking through cameras.
Hmm.
So take a moment to look and just really soak it in.
Yeah. That's good advice. It's super easy to just look through your viewfinder or look at your phone taking a picture, and the pictures never do it justice. Obviously, everybody's curious, and no one can be here all the time, and so that's why we like to bring you these views. But when you're there in person, nothing can really do justice the sheer scale of everything. And try to see it from different angles. That's one thing that's pretty cool, because like you can see the launch site from the road, but going over to the beach is a good view as well. And same with production site. I don't know. There's just so much to see. Sometimes you gotta move a little bit just to see like around a corner.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing I'd add to that is, if whatever a SpaceX employee asks you to do, like if they ask you to move, if they just be very respectful. It is a
Oh yeah,
work site.
yeah,
So yeah, like just be cognizant of where you are, and if someone asks you, hey, like, can someone in authority says, hey, can you step 10 feet to the right? Step 10 feet to the right. You
yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Do everything you can to stay out of their way, and that's pretty easy. So you kind of have to you have to work in order to get in their way. So just stay out of their way. Basically, a good rule of thumb there is you stay across the street from whatever like if you're the production site, you stay on the other side of the street, and same for the launch site. Now out on the beach, once you're on the sand, you can pretty much go wherever you want. Just be careful driving onto the sand, because my last trip, oh boy,
Oh,
the sand right at the transition from the road to the beach got so loose. I guess like it hadn't rained in a while, so the sand was super loose, and people were getting stuck in that left and right. Like there was almost not a time that I would look over there and there not be someone stuck and getting pulled out. Four-wheel drive, you even still have to worry a little bit sometimes. But then, like second to last day, I don't know if it's like the you know, local government or city employees or what, but somebody came out and smoothed it out. So I was actually able to get my little Prius out there on the sand. All right, let's see. Let's go back into the question queue. Transom JC says, "Wouldn't the quick disconnect arm mess with Mechzilla moving up and down the tower?" I see.
Yeah. It's a good question. They
I think it's
they would
above,
have.
right?
Well, but the arms have to be able to move too, right? Especially if they catch the ship and have to move ship or pick up ship from the ground and move it up. I believe the arms just swing out of the way of one another. Basically, like if you think about like where the catch arms would be attached on their rails to go up and down the tower, the swing arm for the fueling arm would not interfere with that movement, and they could swing it out of the way so that the other ones could go up and down. That's how I'm envisioning it,
Yeah.
at least, because otherwise you're exactly right. Like the catch arms have to be able to get above and below the fueling arm, so they've got to have ways to clear them out from one another.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's one of those. I'm sure they've thought about this issues.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it is a good question because we do. I mean, I'm really struggling here. Help me out if there is a tower that I am forgetting about this. I don't think there is another launch tower out there that has something that has arms that run the entire up and down length, or close to the whole up and down length of the entire thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think so
yeah,
far there's no really demand for it since
yeah.
like most launch towers are just used for like fueling, maybe crew ops, and even that is rare. So catching a booster is kind of new.
Yeah, right.
And then Raziel wanted to know how fast will Mechzilla go up and down the tower, which I
Yeah, I
think
don't think we're
remains to
going.
be seen.
Yeah, I don't think this is like a breakneck thing where the arms like can transit the tower in like 5 seconds.
Right.
I think this is a system where it's gonna be methodical in how they do it. Because you still don't want to lift these massive things very quickly, right? You want to make sure you've got them under control. People are going to need to be spotting them, things like that, at least at first, depending on how automated they're going to end up going with all of this. So, yeah, yeah, I don't think they're going to move very quickly.
Now I'm picturing, when they actually do a catch, there'll be a little bit of like dampening it as it, like
Hmm.
if you toss an egg up in the air, when it comes down, you kind of cradle it. Your hand goes down with it. And I imagine there'd be a little bit of that, right?
I would imagine because one thing that it's going to be doing, right, that Elon has talked about is that those catch arms will have they will have a situational awareness of where the booster is, so that now exactly how that's going to work, he hasn't really elaborated just yet. But yeah, like I envision like the arms are going to be like pre-positioned one place, and as the booster starts to descend through them, they're going to start to move down to help cushion, but also catch it, and help balance out those forces and those loads that would be imparted to the booster when they touch the arms.
Right. And
And
if you're
speaking,
just, oh, go ahead.
yeah. Oh no, go ahead. I think we're going to do
Oh,
the same
well,
exact thing, so go
yeah,
for it.
I was gonna say, yeah, if you're just joining us, the reason we're all here today is because our colleague Nick out there in Boca Chica heard a call over the PA, which, AKA Hoppy, I'm sure the announcement probably came from Hoppy, and yeah, heard that the Booster 4 lift should be happening momentarily. Now, let's see, that was what, I don't know, 30 minutes ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We started about 30 minutes ago. So as you can see, there are workers up there. They're kind of like peeking over the railing. Looks like, and this looks familiar. To if you
It
were
Yeah.
here
looks,
for
yeah.
if you were here
This
for
looks
the
good.
previous lift. Yeah. How many people we got up there right now, Adrian?
Still the same. There was no people joined. But yeah, I was about to say the same. Like they entered that position a few minutes ago, and this is exactly the same position they had for the touchdown of the booster on the pad previously, where they made sure that everything fits and looked. I always imagine that they are looking down to like where the Raptors are, so that there is everything fitting as
Make
well.
sure
But
make sure the Raptor engine bells don't hit the stand as it comes out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be nice.
We joke, but that's what they're doing,
it
right?
is.
I
Yeah,
mean, those
yeah,
are spotted. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I
Now,
mean, that's the most expensive part.
right.
Oh,
And there
yeah.
is some amount of clearance there. It's not like, there's just a couple of inches in that gap there. I don't think, but it's still there. There's a concern of wind and then the booster swinging and stuff. So yeah, that's what these folks are here for, to make sure that it doesn't get swinging too much.
Yeah. Now there is now. So for what you're saying there, Stephen, right? Like as we watch them spot Booster 4 here getting ready to lift, is that there is some room, but it is usually fairly tight in
Yeah.
those exhaust cutouts and everything. Now they also might be standing on extended platforms, right? Like when it's out there being processed, you can put platforms where you don't need them and don't want them during launch, right?
Right.
But it's not much room. I mean, there really usually isn't a lot of clearance for those release points. which
And
is
then-
why vertical ascents are very key.
Right. Yeah, clearing the tower is one of the most important parts, one could say.
Yes, it is.
Is that the moment
At
where
the-
you mention Astra? Or
Well, yeah, I
There,
mean,
there are
but I
many
mean, like, we've
ways
also-
of clearing towers. It doesn't have
Yes,
to be vertical.
Yep, moonwalking is also a good way to clear a tower, as we saw earlier this month. Yeah.
All right, let's see. Matej, I think is how you would say it. Are the chopsticks going to be lifted today? That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. I'm not sure. And here's why. Historically, they only seem to do like one major lift a day. And by major lift, I mean like major lifts like with things on in and around the actual pad. We have seen them do booster and ship lifts and a cryo shell lift, like on the same day. But in terms of like massive hardware getting moved, we haven't. So never say never. But like if they can get this one off and they've already got everyone else there and they've got the cranes hooked up, maybe you could do it. But if they end up needing, but I think that's another question. Where on the tower are they going to get attached to? Are they going up to that same sort of level where you can see the arm platform that's already there? Is that where they're going? Are they going to get attached other places? I think that's an open-ended question as well. Right now, but today, I'd be happy, but I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see those chopsticks go up there on the tower. I remember seeing the first pieces arrive at Boca Chica, and now to see them finally, it was kind of neat because like I saw the pieces arrive, and then when I went back the second time earlier this month, like to see in person, you know, how much work had been done, and to just still see them grinding on it, you know, still. I don't mean like. I guess I mean grinding, like working, you know, still welding on it and adding things, and yeah, it'll be cool to see these things work, see how they're attached, see what they look like on the tower.
You always can see how big they are when you just have this one camera angle where you can see them peeking over the walls, and you have like these. I think that's the mechanism that will later be installed at the tower. And you can just see them peeking over the wall and laying there next to the tower, and they're just enormous.
Yeah, they're huge. Let's see. Oh, here. Let's see. We had Alex Punk with a very generous $50. Thank you very much. Any concerns on the pending FAA approvals and public comment? I hope everyone's sending their support for SpaceX to the FAA.
A rare one-word answer from Chris. No.
No.
Nope.
You think it'll be all good when it's all over?
Yeah. If there were the longer answer,
Yeah.
still short, but the longer answer. If there were a major issue, it would have been in the draft environmental report. The draft environmental report comment periods like this, yes, the report still does need to be finalized. Is there a possibility that someone could say something during a public comment period that everyone goes, wow, we never thought of that?
Right.
Always a possibility. I will note out. I will note, though. I have no idea where that first part of that sentence came from. That was horrible. My apologies. Is that it's the Federal Aviation Administration was the lead federal agency for the environmental assessment. NASA also participated. The National Park Service, the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service were all cooperating and investigative agencies who looked at this, who heard everything, who were at the initial public meetings when these things were happening. It's going to be very, very, very rare for some major showstopper to come up after the draft comes out. This is sort of like the final piece of formalizing the puzzle. Everyone now gets to see what the draft report says. We can comment on it, but you've got to have a really good reason at this point for why something wouldn't have been in there for them to now catch. Or for something to change very drastically, and nothing in the draft environmental assessment is concerning or worrying in terms of them getting approval.
I think one of the things people bring up is the wildlife refuge area, but
Hmm.
maybe forget that the Cape sits on
Yes.
a wildlife refuge area, right?
Yeah, the Kennedy Space Center in particular sits on on the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge, and sort of either taking portions of wildlife refuges or creating wildlife refuges around space sites has been a very common thing in the U.S. for how our spaceports have operated. Usually, they kind of already are there because we like big empty spaces to put our spaceports,
Right.
Which
um,
is good.
which is good, and everything. But yeah, it's not really a thing. Like the biggest thing in wildlife refuges is if you did have a case where like there's one species that's critically endangered and this is literally the only place on the planet that it is found. You could run afoul of our environmental protection laws in that case. Or like massive things would have to happen to protect that particular species, but that's not a concern at Boca.
Right, and actually, one species I saw there it was one of the highlights of my trip was I saw a nilgai, which
What
is
are those?
well, at first glance, okay, so I'm out there, I'm shooting the sunrise, and I hear something tromping through the water. There's a lot of very shallow water, as long as it has rained somewhat recently. So out there in Boca Chica, there's just like you'll look for miles and you'll see like birds and stuff walking around in it, but it's only like a few inches deep. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, I heard something tromping through the water to my left, and I turn and I look, and my first instinct was, oh, a deer, because that's sort of what they look like. But it kind of stood there staring at me. I'm staring at it. I'm, of course, trying to get photos of it. And then it takes off running, and it doesn't run like any deer I've ever seen. It ran like a horse.
Oh.
And yeah, they're like looking at them straight on. They look like a deer, but when you see their side profile, they're just thick and beefy. But yeah, it was just running through the water, and yeah, it's actually an invasive species apparently.
Oh.
But I'm not sure when like they were brought here or whatever, but I
I think
mean,
they're from India, right?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it just as somebody that just likes seeing wildlife, it was super cool to see. But yeah, you've got these like super blue crabs out there that I've never seen anywhere else. It's like it's almost like royal blue. You see them hiding in the dunes and stuff. Lots of birds, there's lots of really cool stuff out there to see. There's
Yeah.
now, Chris,
Yeah.
have you ever seen the pelicans we have here fly in V's? I know I see them fly in
Yes.
groups. I don't see them flying in V's that often, but they do it all the time in Boca Chica.
I've seen him do it here too. Not at the Cape, but up here in Daytona and Flagler area of Florida,
Oh,
they
okay.
do they patrol. They patrol. That's kind of like why I joke because my significant other, her mom used to call it the Air Force,
Right.
because they were patrolling the beach. So that I called them that one day on air, and hence our shirt, the Boca Chica Air Force.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. That was I don't know. Maybe I just don't pay enough attention. But when I saw that for the first time, because it was like 20 of them, and I was like, I don't remember seeing them fly in V's like that, like around the Cape. Um, I don't know. Let's see. Oh,
Yeah.
I like this question, Astria. I'm going to OKC. Is that Oklahoma City? I think
I
in
think
two
so.
weeks, and we may drive to Dallas for a day. Should I try to go to Starbase? Is it worth the drive from Dallas? It's a long
Um,
one. Texas is
it's a
big.
yeah. I actually got a very similar question to this earlier this week. Not the same cities, but basically the same thing of someone who's going to be like near-ish where like this question of should we go came up.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, I think you should go,
Yep.
but I want to be very upfront with you about what that means. Boca is in the middle of nowhere. The
Yeah.
nearest city is Brownsville, and that's a 35 to 40-minute drive,
Hmm.
and a little bit longer to get like to hotels and things like that. Your other option is South Padre Island, which, if you're driving from Dallas, would be closer for you, but that's an hour away. Even though it's only like 12 miles, there's no direct access road. So you have to go completely out down to Brownsville to then go through Brownsville to get to the road that gets you to Boca. It's really remote. It's a long drive from Dallas. It is a long drive from Dallas. I would really only recommend you do it truly if you can get hotel accommodations in the area for the night. I absolutely would not attempt a drive from Dallas there to see it and go back. And that's
8 hours, by the way.
Yeah, without traffic, it's 8 hours. So yeah, I mean, it's worth it. It's worth it, but you want to be able to spend some decent amount of time there. Because I fear if it's just you go and you see it and you have to leave within an hour, that you might end up regretting it because of how little you actually got to see or experience. So that would be my answer in terms of Dallas. Now, if that's the closest you're ever conceivably going to be, like for the foreseeable future, up to you. Like, go. I don't want to discourage you from going. I just want you to know the reality of, like, Texas doesn't look as big on a map as it actually is.
Yeah, it's huge. So, you can drive all day and not cross the state line.
And not cross a state line, yeah.
As a person coming or living in Central Europe, 8 hours drive gets me to a lot of places when I think about it. When I now think about it, that you can drive in only Texas for 8 hours. Mm-hmm. It's that wow.
Mm-hmm. Oh
it's
yeah,
big.
it's possible to drive for 6 hours in Florida and never cross the state line as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I could probably reach like 6 countries in 6 hours. Like 6,
I know.
not every country in 6 hours, but I could reach 6 different countries in 6 hours, depending on the direction.
On that.
But yeah, I would also say, sorry, one more thing, Astria. One thing you might want to consider when you're in Oklahoma City in 2 weeks is what is currently there, because like, if Starship is fully stacked, my answer might be completely different than if they're just still working on the tower and the boosters on the ground and the ship is somewhere else, right? If it's fully stacked, like, watch where they are, because it might be worth going even for that hour if things are fully stacked. But anyway, yes, I see that most of our workers. Oh, here they come. I was going to say, I see most of our workers have disappeared.
They're having a meeting on the right side in the shadow of the booster, I think.
Oh, I see them. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense to use the shadow of the booster to not stand in the sun for while you're doing a meeting, I guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, the sun out there is hot. It is still kind of early in the day, but it gets pretty warm out there. In fact, I'm hoping that my next chance to go to Boca Chica will be like in the fall, in the winter. I want to see what it's like when it's not sweltering hot out there.
I will not go there in the summer, for sure.
It's actually really nice when it's not super hot.
Yeah.
It's actually really nice when it's not sweltering down there.
All right. Let's see. Let's go back to the question bag. Elmer wanted to know, is the booster designed to stay out in the rain for such long times? Can rain remain in open upper parts?
I would think so. Yes, we saw other Starship prototypes. I think it was with SN8. It was early ones, SN5 or SN6, who had like a small pool on top of them before a few days because it rained and there was the bulkhead and the upper ring had some space where rain and the pool could form. So I would guess that won't be an issue for the booster.
I've tried to look at the top of a Falcon 9, like at the interstage when they're coming into port here, and tried to see if is there like a hole that water can get out because a lot of times they're coming. It's taking them days to get back from a drone ship landing, and I imagine water could pool up there. Or do they just wait till they get back and shop vac it out of there?
Shop vac it out of there. There might be other ways that they have to purge it out of there or get it out of there. Um, yeah, it's I don't think it's an issue. This is a great question. But I can literally only think of one time. Well, no, I take that back. Well, no, I don't. I can only think of one time that rain became a major issue for a vehicle. And that was Starliner.
Yeah.
In July, I mean, rockets sit out at launch pads for a long time, and I know this question is specifically geared to the fact that there's nothing on top of it,
Right.
but they can sit out there for a really long time, and they are really built to handle the weather elements. I mean, just considering the beating they have to go through, especially these to get back. Like the atmosphere is not forgiving. So yeah, it's not a problem. It's a great question, but it's not a problem.
All right. Adrian Rivero said, "Can you explain the how and why a thrust ram is used in proofing?"
Yes. I take the Adrian question. It is used to simulate Raptor thrust. So when it was used before in CryoTest, it was used to simulate a Raptor engine being there and providing its thrust for the vehicle. Since that is a force that you would have in a normal launch environment, so you would need to simulate these forces for a test to verify that they are not an issue for the tank structure. So that is why the Rams were used. And yeah, lately they weren't used that much anymore. But we, especially early, we had done a lot with the thrust ram with 3 sims, and we also saw them rolling that down to the launch site a few days ago, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those situations where you can sort of eliminate the variable of the actual engines when really you're just trying to test the structure, and rather than wait until you're doing a static fire, it's a lot easier to test it, do the cryo test, and then apply the force without actually having the engines there. That way you're not worried about, how are the engines running today. You can get the data that you need without worrying about firing up the Raptors, is sort of my thinking.
Also, you can test it while there's nitrogen in it. For using the Raptors, you will always have the issue of using methane and liquid oxygen. So in case it goes bad there, it has it's a little bit of a bigger issue with methane and oxygen involved.
And it's actually valuable, or it's obviously valuable enough to build those thrust rams, because it does take time, but there's obviously value in doing it that way because of the fact that they've built them. They've taken the time to actually build them to use them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your point, Adrian, just to slightly echo, but add one thing, like, yeah, you do not want an accidental methane tank crack or leak, because we've seen what happens to starships when there is a leak path in their methane tanks. So,
and which one was it?
Well.
Which one was
I knew
it?
You were going to ask me that. Was it 10?
Which one? What?
The one that
Was it
popped
9 or
during the
10?
cryo test is what I'm getting
Oh,
at. Because that was
sorry,
it was
I'm
not as
thinking
extra.
something
It looked,
That way.
What?
The one that cracked during cryo test were MK1, which had the bulkhead blow off.
Pop, yeah, and it looked violent, and it looked like a huge mess. But that nitrogen spilled out, and I'm guessing just evaporates. You don't have to worry about fires or anything. If it pops, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Also, SN1, I think, and SN3 were also failed during a cryo test, right? If I remember correctly.
I know there were multiple.
Yes. Yeah.
And SN4 failed doing a static fire.
Yeah.
Or after.
Yeah, that was the impressive one right before DM2. No, the one I'm thinking of is was it SN9 or SN10 that landed, but there was a methane leak, and it eventually the fire got through everything and it blew 10. Thank you. SN10. landed successfully, but had a methane leak and blew shortly after, blew a few minutes after landing, which is the big reason why you don't want a leak in your methane tank.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Curveless Sphere said, didn't Elon say hopefully static fire this week? Why is the booster now being removed? Well, that's another good opportunity to bring everyone in that is just now arriving.
Yeah. So yeah, booster. I'll take first crack at this, Adrian, if you want, and please feel free to add. Two things spring to mind instantly. One, that when Elon said that, that was the actual plan, and something has changed since then, and they need to get the booster off the stand. Now, we on our forum, and fairly reliable but not confirmed independently, is that they're taking this off so that they can attach the catch arm towers, the catch arms to the tower, and that it's just a spacing. It's a hey, extra safe. This is flight hardware on this booster. Let's get it out of here while we're lifting. Or let's at least get it off the stand while we're lifting the arms. So that's it's so that could have thrown a wrench into a static fire happening this week when the teams realize, oh, we should actually remove this. We also have no idea how long it's going to take to attach those arms. So I say this with take every grain of salt that it is. It is also possible that those arms could go on tomorrow and Monday. They could put the booster back on Tuesday and be in a position to static fire by the end of the week. So it's not necessarily out of the question, but that's sort of where I think we land. And I think one of the things that can be both aggravating, but that I kind of appreciate about like the hints we get from Elon at Starbase, is it does give us an insight into what the current line of thinking is at that exact moment. But that can change 10 minutes later. And It is sort of fascinating to see how quickly things can change and how schedules can be rearranged out there. But that's how I'd answer that question. I don't know if you've got anything else, Adrian.
Yeah, also with these, it's always when Elon tweets about we will test this or that in 1 or 2 weeks or something in that area, you have to consider how many factors SpaceX has to look at in Boca Chica. It's not only vehicle readiness, it's can we get the fuel, it's weather, it's regulatory. So everything of these factors has the potential to delay a potential test or change the schedule. And if you, for example, have something that moves the static fire down a few more days, then maybe you think about, well, if it's moving down a few days, maybe we'll do something else instead and change the order. So it's fluid. They can change and they can react to everything that's happening, and sometimes that means scheduling changes.
That's one of the beauties of having your own launch site, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Department of Chicken Nuggets says, is it true that Booster 5 will be the first to attempt a catch? I think that gets back into our... that may be the current plan.
Great name.
Yeah.
We don't... I think that at the point we don't really know. I think in the interview with Tim Dodd, Elon said Booster 5 maybe, but I'm not sure about that right now. And as always, that could change.
Yeah, because if they lose Booster 4 in a test of some kind, or a test shows that Booster 4 can't fly, then 5 might sub in for 4 on the first orbital attempt. It's...
Yeah, might tag in.
I know. Well, I might tag in, but man, yeah, these questions are always they're somewhat infuriating, right? Because the answer is, well, I don't know. We don't know yet.
Maybe
it can change. Yeah, maybe.
And it looks like the workers have distributed themselves somewhat equally around.
There's still a meeting of about 6 workers on the right side.
Oh, yes. It's like some of them are like, yeah, let's go. And some of them are like, wait a minute, we got to talk.
The usual meeting atmosphere. Somebody is not finished with that meeting yet.
Yeah, so if you're just joining us, we are expecting this lift to happen really any moment. I mean, we've seen the workers come and go, and it looks right now like. I mean, we've seen him in this position before. We can't say for sure exactly when it's going to happen. We know that there was a PA announcement that the lift would happen soon, and we are coming up on an hour now since that. Actually, I think we're a little over an hour since we first heard that announcement. And we see more workers arriving.
Yeah, about an hour and 10 minutes since the announcement.
Now, I wonder... Oh, what do you got? Is there movement?
I'm looking at the workers right now. At least there's movement again. I'm getting excited about worker movement at this point. And when I'm seeing them move around the booster and at least not standing there in a meeting, I'm getting excited.
Yeah, and we're expecting them to lift it up and place it where?
On the stand from this angle to the left, I think. There's a stand next to the orbital launch mount right now, which is used to store boosters on. So it most likely will go there and stand there, and if the theory is correct, stand there until they install the chopsticks, and then be moved back on the orbital launch mount again.
All right, and we'll be here for all of that. Of course, y'all know this already. Anytime you want to take a look and see what's going on at Starbase, we've got Starbase Live rolling 24/7 for your viewing enjoyment. So nothing ever happens without the watchful eyes of all the Starbase fans.
Yeah, we had also, for example, we had a big day yesterday. Starbase Live was very active yesterday with multiple things moving down the road. We had, I think yesterday was the thrust simulator. I'm not even sure right now, but we had like 3 or 4 things moving in quick succession down the road, and everything was tracked on Starbase Live. We had the test stand, the booster stand moving down yesterday, and the thrustum. So 2 things moving down in quick succession, everything covered and everything tracked on Starbase Live. And yeah, go there. You will not miss anything.
Yeah, and if you'd like to get notifications, because of the way YouTube works, we can't just send out a notification when an ongoing stream has something interesting happening. So you really want to make sure that you are following NASA Spaceflight on Twitter. Also, Michael Baylor, he's usually somewhere around watching what's going on. So he's next Spaceflight on Twitter. And whenever there's something interesting going on Starbase Live, we always tweet it out, and the whole team retweets it and stuff, and so you can get an idea of what's going on and jump in there. And the chat is always active. It's a pretty good crew in the chat, in the Starbase Live chat.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep your ear to the ground on that one. Oh. Oh. Beautiful. Oh, man, look at the sky.
Well, now.
All
that's
right.
That's a nice angle.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so apparently we have a new angle here. Is that Mary or is Nick? Do we know?
That is Mary, I believe. Yeah.
Well, either way, we
yes, it is.
appreciate
Mary and
this.
Eric.
Yeah, appreciate this view here. Oh, this is great.
Yeah, this view coming from Mary, and Nick is also out there too, watching this and ready for us. This is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be a beautiful time lapse from this angle too. With those puffy clouds. I mean, that's just so it's that beautiful blue. You don't always see it like that. Sometimes it's like a kind of a hazy look, but that deep blue is just so beautiful with the puffy clouds going by.
Now only the question is when they will lift it.
Yeah, when lift. Hashtag when lift.
Yeah, I saw a variation of different when versions in the chat already. Some including chopsticks, some including cryotest, and some including lift. So it's a never stopping flood of when something.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Here's a question. What are the mechanisms on the booster stand? And I'm guessing they're asking like what actually holds the booster there.
Oh, the hold downs?
I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the hold downs are you can't see them from this. You can kind of see them from some of the aerial images that SpaceX has released back when, oh my gosh, how many was that 2 months ago now? The beginning of August when they stacked the booster and Starship for the very first time. They had some aerial shots where they were looking down into the mount, the orbital launch mount there, and you could see them all around the perimeter and where they were. They're just down below.
Yeah, they look like they just
Booster-
kind of fold out and
Yeah,
like
they kinda
cradle
come
and
out.
hold it.
Yeah, they kind of look like from what we understand, that they hold the lip of the vehicle, basically because of how they have to retract and come away with the engine bells there and everything. That yeah, it's unique. It's not a hold down system I've seen before.
Yeah.
And it's obviously very different from the ones that they use for the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy fleets as well.
Right. Let's see. Human says, do you think the quick disconnect swings back during the launch?
At least a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it can move, so why not?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it has to get out of the way, or to create enough clearance, right, or the clearances that you might want with the vehicle. Not sure when it would actually disconnect though and come away, like because SpaceX is trying to get to these like disconnect arms, right, that can go back, right, that they don't require a lot of manual labor to reconnect quick disconnects and things like that. So if it's one like that, they could disconnect it and move it out of the way before the engine ignition sequence begins. And then if they needed to move it back and reattach it, I think that's a possibility for them. But yeah, almost certainly it's got to move once it detaches from the vehicle.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let's just play this through. Doesn't it kind of have to, because it will reside above the grid fins, and the grid fins don't fold anymore, so it's got to move out of the way for the grid fins.
Oh yeah,
That's true. Yeah.
Good
All
point.
right. Yeah, it's a good point. Okay, Nick Lewis wants to know, is Starship limited to the one flight path that weaves through Cuba and the other islands?
No. That is one possible trajectory to avoid land going out from Boca. There are southerly routes available where they would theoretically be high enough to permit land overflight of Mexico if there were agreements in place to do so. Sort of like how Falcon 9s go over Cuba when they go south from here, but they're high enough in their altitude that that's considered safe when they're going over on powered flight. So could have things like that. There are some other routes that would shoot down below Jamaica and Cuba and sort of like thread the Yucatan there and go off that way. They've got a lot of launch azimuths that are available from Boca. Yeah.
And then, don't forget, they're going to launch from Kennedy as well. So then they should be able to cover everything.
Plan. Yeah, that's the plan. In fact, I believe I was reading there's a line in the environmental assessment for this launch site here in Texas that we're looking at right now that did specifically say that additional environmental assessments would be needed for other launch locations. So it is still their intention to launch elsewhere, and Florida is definitely one of them. That pad started then stopped when they shifted everything over to Boca just for the test campaign. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how many land-based spaceports these vehicles actually end up launching from here.
Jacob Miller said, could they ever strap multiple boosters together like Falcon Heavy?
Ooh, I've seen some fascinating renders.
Yeah, same. I guess the answer is could, maybe, yes, will. I am not sure.
Oh man.
I mean, my lord. I mean, this thing already produces so much thrust as it is getting off, just getting off the pad. I mean, this is a, hang on, I want to find the exact line in the environmental assessment report. I mean, Starship, as envisioned with 37 engines on the booster, which is more than the 33 Elon had just said, so up to 37, would be capable of a maximum liftoff thrust of 74 meganewton, allowing a maximum liftoff thrust of approximately 5,000 megatons.
Oh man,
That would
So
mean
let me just put
222.43.
Yeah. Hang on, mega newtons to pounds force. Just want to make absolutely sure I'm doing this conversion right. So that, good lord, how many zeros is that?
Oh god, that's always an indication for a great number.
1.6 to the 7th? What, to e to the 7th? It's a lot. I mean, this vehicle is going to do a lot. I believe that's just over 16 million pounds force of thrust for this. And if you start talking about strapping 3 of those things together, oh boy. I don't think there's a need for it, honestly. To strap 3 of them together. I think if they ever wanted to upscale this, they would just go to the 12-meter variant that they talked about, like the even wider diameter variant that they had talked about. This is the 9-meter variant here.
The ITS.
Yeah, the ITS, the Interplanetary Transport System. Yes, took me a minute there. It's had so many names. But yeah, I think that's what they would do instead of trying to strap 3 of these things together. Yeah.
Well, it stopped, but I saw what looked like venting down there on the right side of the orbital tanks. Did y'all see that?
No, you have my attention.
Yeah. Well, it stopped now. I didn't want to interrupt Chris there, but I
didn't even see it. You should totally have interrupted me, actually.
Well, I figured it would keep going, and foolishly, I waited until you were done, and I'm like, oh, now it's stopped. You can see. I wonder if I can find it. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was.
Purge
I mean, we
line, maybe.
saw them.
Yeah.
We saw them testing the GSEs the other day, so there's probably at least some gas involved there. And we saw the suborbital tank farm vent
There it
from
goes.
time to time.
Oh, right there. You see it? Bottom right.
Yeah. Maybe that's just like. Oh no, it's not even on the tank farm, right? If you look at that angle, it's more to the left.
Just interesting.
Yeah.
And this is an
And-
interesting question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, and again, for those of you who have just joined us recently, we are waiting for Brewster. Let's try that again. Booster 4's removal from the orbital launch stand here. Temporary removal, as we understand it, most likely because the catch arms are going to be installed onto the tower here very shortly. Maybe not today. We'll see. But yeah, we're standing by and waiting for this booster. We had some indication that it was ready to go about an hour ago, more or less, when we went live. And clearly a couple of things have come up that have delayed them. But that's what we're standing by and waiting for here at Boca Chica and Starbase.
And it's not because Booster 4 is in trouble, y'all.
Yeah, it's
So far.
fine.
No, it hasn't been naughty. It's not going for a timeout.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting punishing mechanism for orbital class boosters. You're not longer on the orbital launch pad. We will put the rest of booster 3 on it now.
Okay, I want to hit. We've got a couple new members here. Cole Peel is a new member. Thank you very much. Lance Jones as well, and Presby MICU just came in less than a minute ago. Thanks for that ongoing support. It helps us keep the lights on, keep robots roboting, and all that sort of stuff.
Keeps the
Keep
robots
robot.
roboting. I love it.
That sounds like a good T-shirt idea.
Keep them robots roboting. All right. Anthony Kehoe said, could a starship be used as an ascent-descent vehicle and be used as the engines to power a von Braun wheel in space? Oh boy.
Can you
I'm
throw that
lacking
one up on
knowledge for
screen?
this
Thank
question.
you.
A von Braun wheel? I'm not familiar. Are y'all familiar with a von Braun wheel?
Nope.
A Von Braun wheel? No.
I
Hang on.
am.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Google.
Hang
Google.
on. Von Braun wheel.
Okay.
Oh.
Rotating
Oh,
wheel
okay.
space station. Okay. So sort of like
Oh,
2001.
gravity.
Yeah.
Artificial gravity. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I get it now. Okay. There's a theoretical way. I won't call it a plan, but there's a theoretical way where you could tether two starships together, or and basically rotate them around their Berry center, the center of rotation. And that would allow for the creation of something like a von Braun wheel, where, artificial gravity would be created to an extent, which could help. So there is sort of an idea for how they could do that. So yes, but not with the engines to power it. I think we actually have calculated this out because we've gotten this type of a question before. The rate at which the ship itself would have to spin to create the artificial gravity, you'd black out. So you do have to kind of tether two of them together to get the balance right on that one. Because we've had this question before, and I remember someone in one of our members figuring this out, like figuring out what the rotation rate would have to be, and it's like, oh my god, like you yeah, with just one starship. But with two, you could potentially tether them. Now, I'm going to stop short of calling that a plan, because things that it is capable of doing doesn't necessarily mean there is a plan to do it right now. But
Right.
it's possible to do it. Yes.
Right on. Josh Ritterherf said hashtag win chop. Pleasure spending Saturday morning with the best nerds around. Thanks as always for the stream. 73 from SRB country. Is that Utah? One would assume.
Wait,
That's
thanks for always 73 from it.
yeah, 73. I'm guessing is at age, and then SRB country, where
From
SRBs are built.
country. Oh
Yeah.
yes, Utah.
Oh,
Utah.
Yeah, Utah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, it cuts off. It cuts off. I can only see 73 from SRB.
Oh,
I can't see the final word on
gotcha.
the screen.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry,
Okay.
that's why I was confused. Yeah.
Yeah, SRB. Well, hello there, Josh. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, SRB country. That would be Promontory, up near Promontory, Utah, Salt Lake.
Yeah, there
Yep.
you go. Yeah, and hopefully you can stick around for this lift, which should be I
Any
don't know
second.
any minute. Yeah,
Any second, I know, right? Like lift.
let's do
Please
it.
lift.
Everyone, put your positive lift thinking caps on.
All right. Let's see. Jayanth, I'm not sure how to say your name. I'm sorry. If the chopsticks are mounted above the quick disconnect, how will it place the booster down since it seems to be higher? Yeah,
Yes.
we sort of got this this sort of question towards the beginning as well. And what did we come up with?
Yeah, so the way I'm envisioning it is that these arms have ways of swinging out of the way of each other. So that fueling arm will most likely is either out of the clearance zone or can swing out of the clearance zone for them. So yeah, because the arms have to be able to move up and down the tower from the design that Elon has talked about. So they've got to be able to cross over where that disconnect, where that quick disconnect fueling arm is. So either that arm has to swing out of the way to give clearance, or they've designed a way to get the arms around them. It's a good cut. It's a really good question, though.
Yeah.
And we were kind of mentioning earlier, Jay, and this might have been before you joined us, which is why we love questions like this, and why we always say, like, if you've got a question, ask it, even if you're thinking that it's probably already been answered earlier on the stream, because new people join. And these are all really cool questions, because we've never seen a tower like this. So it's so hard to try to even use a historical example for how this could work of arms that need to move up and down below each other. But manufacturing equipment does have that in automation, so it's totally possible to do, and that's why that's like our first sort of thought of how that would work, is that they can just swing out of the way of each other.
Yeah. Yeah, because where is the quick disconnect actually attached? Because it's coming around the tower, but I believe it's actually holding on the corner opposite of the launch mount. Is that right?
It's basically to the right of the booster, I think. Like if you're looking from the tower to the booster, it's on the right side of you. If I see that correctly right now.
Yeah, and it's behind. Yeah, which actually I'm looking at that, and I might actually need to amend a previous statement that I just said based on that angle. It might not have to swing out of the way to avoid the grid fins if that's the actual height it stays at to fuel Starship, which could be about right, actually. Because that disconnect and fueling system would be very near the base of ship, which it's sort of aligned with. I still envision that thing's got to swing, though, away from the rocket at liftoff at the very least, and obviously get away from the arms.
Yeah.
But yeah, it might not have to move to get away from the grid fins based on this, and that it might, friends, be another piece of the puzzle of why the grid fins are where they are on that booster. Because we always heard tower clearance, and it's so far away from the tower that it's the arms.
Right.
It's the fueling arms, I bet. Yeah. Also, that's probably just a good place to have them on ship, but anyway.
All right. Let's see. Tavish Dozier
Oh, I like the name.
wants to know, weird question, is there grilled cheese in space?
Ah, well,
I hope so.
not to get into a debate between what America calls it and what Britain calls it, but I have an odd feeling that the closest we're going to be able to get to something like that is like you melted cheese on bread. Is there grilled cheese in space? Right now, I think you'd sadly have to make it on the ground and take it up, because open heat sources on spacecraft are not the best things in the world, especially cooking surfaces. Fires in space are a huge issue that we mitigate a lot. And of course, in the US, we are very, very sensitive to fires in spacecraft because of Apollo 1. So, yeah. Now, that's current. How that changes, I don't know, because things are going to have to change, right? Or we're going to have to be willing to try different things. And maybe it's also been a space and mass issue that Starship will negate, because hey, at 100 metric tons anywhere in the solar system for a payload capacity, that's a pretty good rocket. It's an amazing rocket. So I don't know. It's good, but like, yeah, at this point, I think they'd have to be made on the ground and launched up, because there's no way to grill, heat anything like that up there at this point.
By the way, I have a question to this. There's a difference between what Americans think what grilled cheese is to what Britons think?
Oh, so over there they're called toasties, and we call them grilled cheeses. Even though we don't grill them, you toast them, and the cheese melts. So like they're called toasties in England, but we call them grilled cheese, even though we don't technically grill them. It's different words for the same thing.
Gotcha.
British and American English have so many of those things. Football. But
I will not.
I'm sorry. Yeah, see, I said football, so no one can yell at me. But yeah, anyway, we digress. We digress, as we do often on these streams. The longer they go.
It's true. And actually, I think this is for you, Adrian. Paulus Plain said, "New NASA spaceflight European dude. Where do you come from? Have some more North Korean dollars. Love from Norway."
So I am now just going to call you New European dude, Adrian.
Thanks. I love nicknames. I'm coming from North Rhine-Westphalia in the western area of Germany, close to the Dutch border. That's where I live. And basically sitting in the center of Europe.
There you go. Yeah, right smack dab in the middle. Okay, here from Austin Barrick says, will they use the catch arm after installed to pick the booster up and set it onto the launch mount as a test?
Absolutely fantastic question. Don't know.
Oh no.
That's the best questions.
These are the, yeah, I know. They're the infuriating answers, but they're the easiest ones to give sometimes. But like we always do, let us explain. So it's not just an infuriating answer. Without knowing what their post-install checkouts are of that, and without knowing how quickly they want the booster back on the orbital launch mount for continued campaign testing, it's not really, we can't really say. If they don't need to do a lot of testing, and they can end up using the arms later this week if they get installed relatively quickly, which we think is the plan, maybe, I mean, it's one of those things I would say never rule it out, but usually when you're putting a system like that onto a tower, you really want to make sure that you've got all the kinks worked out of it and all the bugs worked out of it, especially when you're not lifting ground test hardware, when you're lifting flight hardware, which is technically what this booster is. It's both a ground test article and a flight test article. So most companies might be a little more cautious with lifting flight hardware for a test. SpaceX might not care, and do it anyway. But I think it's just going to come down to the timing of when they need the booster back on the mount and how long it's going to take them to check out the arms.
I think it also depends on how important for them is the orbital launch and getting that soon ready, because they don't need to do it with the chopsticks right now. It's not critical to test them before the orbital launch. They are not in any way needed for it. So they might just say, okay, let's not test this, because if something goes wrong, we basically delayed our orbital launch for no reason at all. But if they say we are thinking more in the long term, you might want to have them tested when you have time.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you raised. Like, the only arm on the tower that we know of that is critical to the orbital launch test, the first one coming up here, is the fueling arm, because otherwise there's no way to fuel the Starship upper stage. That's the only one that's actually technically critical that we know of, for orbital flight. This first one. Yeah.
So
good point.
Depends
Good,
on
good
their
point
thinking.
there. Yeah.
All right. And Zachary wanted to know, when will GSE 8 roll out? That's a good question. We did see in a recent daily video, we saw GSE 8 just kind of rolling around the production site.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I just had my joke answer, which was like, I don't know, a couple hours from now. Like, I mean, honest answer, when's the next road closure? Because if it's almost ready to go, that might be it.
We have a 9-hour road closure coming up this Monday, but that closure could also be for testing. Like, it's not an only transport closure, but we saw them using these kinds of closures also for transport. So I would say the next possible time for GSE 8 to join the orbital tank farm is Monday.
Have they transported at night, though? I mean, obviously, the closure starts during daylight hours, but there's a good chunk of, about half of that is at night.
Well, I have an idea about this closure. Since it's earlier than the other ones. It's not 5 to 11, which is most likely the testing closure they're going for right now, but it starts 2 hours earlier. So maybe they want to use these 2 daylight hours they got more for transporting things, and then move into testing in the 5 to 11 or 5 to 12 area.
Yep. Dual use road closures. Yep.
Just a theory, by the way. Not just speculating.
And two, like, for the testing, we're not entirely sure what that would be for, whether that would be for the booster or something for the tank farm or anything like that. Because obviously, if the booster's coming off the pad, and there's a test window on Monday, it's either got to be back on the pad by Monday, or that ain't what they're testing.
Stressful weekend coming.
Right. Well, the robots will get their work out.
That's right. The robots will robot.
Yes. Das had a nice little talk with them and gave them a pep talk. Yeah.
Yeah. We really
they
need
are
y'all.
ready for the mission.
Yeah. And also, I saw a little nudge from somebody in chat that they didn't necessarily know who everybody was. So I figured we'll do a round of introductions. I am Stephen Marr. I'm one of the photographers for NASA Spaceflight, based over here on the Space Coast, with an occasional trip out to Boca Chica. And yeah, that's me. And also with me, we have the assistant managing editor and one of my bosses, Chris Gebhardt. How you
How's
doing,
it
Chris?
going? I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Oh, pretty good. And then also we have one of our writers and also spreadsheet master, Adrian Beal,
Thank you. Hello.
hailing from Germany over there. And then behind the scenes, we also have Michael Baylor pulling switches and pressing knobs and doing what it takes to make this all happen. And out in the field, of course, we have Mary on the scene, and we also have Nick out there on the scene, giving us great views. And they are, while this is going on, I'm sure they are also compiling clips for the daily that'll come out later on today.
Yes, indeed.
So yeah, as far as all that goes, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You know, hey, hit the like button. You know, that's what kids do. But make sure you're subscribed because when these videos come out, they come out every day, and you can see what's going on there in Starbase.
Indeed. Indeed. And I did just want to say too, thank you for all the super chats today as well. Thank you for, sitting there and watching that video. And to all of you who are our channel members, thank you. All those little things. I know sitting through even a 5-second skippable ad is annoying sometimes, and I can never wait to get off of them. But they do help us, and that is a way of supporting us and supporting what we do, so that we can bring you these types of streams today, where we've been on air for what, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and booster not move. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that, SpaceX.
Yeah. Like it's kind of to the point where my stomach is hungry, and now I'm kind of like, all right, well, what restaurant am I getting a delivery from, since I can't go get anything?
So now we know what the workers are doing on the right side of the booster. They were like, okay, let's make the pad announcement and look how long NASA spaceflight stays live while we are just sitting here.
The confused media button, yes,
Yes.
that we joke about.
But yeah, thank you everybody for hanging out with us. We really appreciate y'all being here and throwing your questions out. That helps keep the conversation rolling. So of course, use @NASA Spaceflight with any burning questions you have, even if it maybe has already been asked or you think it's not a good question. Well, the rule always goes that there's probably somebody else wondering the same thing. So throw those out at NASA Spaceflight in the chat. And I will go to this next question. Benjamin.
Okay.
Benjamin wants to know, could you give us a brief explanation on how thrust simulators work?
Oh God.
Is that tough?
I can take I can take the first go at it, Adrian, if you want to chime in afterward.
Go ahead.
I believe the way that they function is that they impart the amount of force onto the points of the vehicle where that would be channeled through the engine section and through all of the it depends on the exact configuration of the vehicle, but you see a lot of stringers, a lot of extra protection and ribbing around the base and around the top of the rocket, and that's to provide structural support. So when these thrust simulators, what they're doing is they're trying to say, okay, when this much amount of thrust is imparted through the engine section, does the booster hold up? And that's what they're trying to test, because you don't want to find out that your booster can't withstand the thrust, especially as it's being held down too, right? Like if your booster can't withstand the thrust of your engines and is ripping itself apart, you kind of want that information without fuel on board. And 30 or 20, oh God, 29 right now, Raptor engines on the base of this thing. So it's basically a way for SpaceX to confirm what the models are telling them, that the rocket can handle the thrust, and they can also use it to test out different thrust profiles if different engines fail, and how that all can change the characteristics down around the base of the vehicle. So basically, it's just a safe non-engine way to say, hey, does the structure do what we think it's going to do and what we planned it to do while thrust is being imparted through it?
I have nothing to add.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. We had just a $10 super chat from Miss Katya Moneypenny. Thank you very much. We appreciate that support. Let's see. Vic Inti said, how many engines would be allowed to fail for a booster launch to still be reliable? So many
That-
engines should need this type of calculations.
Yes.
That depends highly where. It depends highly where in the flight the engine fails, and yeah, basically that's it. If it fails right after liftoff, that might be tough, since there's a reason why this thing has so many engines. But if you have them fail at like 5 seconds before main engine cutoff, you probably can compensate for a few. So it's an unsatisfying answer again, but I guess the answer is it depends.
Yeah. Well, like we've seen
it
Falcon
does,
9s
but,
make
yeah.
it. Like we've seen Falcon 9s lose an engine and still complete their mission. But then we
Yes.
also saw where Astra lost an engine just seconds after liftoff, and it wasn't. There was no way that it was going to make it to orbit at that point.
The later the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, the later the better. But the one thing I will say, because Stephen, you did mention this, right? Like we have seen the Falcons lose engines during flight before, and they've been absolutely fine. And this is where SpaceX and Starship is no different. Now the exact number of engines has been a moving target as the number of engines has changed on the vehicle, and as the thrust produced by each engine has changed as they've gotten better and better at getting the Raptors, out of their like, oh look how cute, a new engine, into, oh wow, that's an engine that's gonna do good things for us.
Yeah.
We do know that Starship, just like Falcon 9, will be able to have engines out at liftoff and still complete the mission. So, and that's very critical, because if you do lose an engine the moment everything disconnects from the launch pad, you absolutely do not want to be like back in the 1960s, and what a lot of rockets are now too, where they would just fall back onto the pad. And because they would not have a high enough thrust to weight ratio to even do what Astra's rocket did, which was just somehow massive props to the guidance and navigation teams who made that software. Because the fact that the rocket was able to recorrect itself vertical and then moonwalk itself away from the launch pad is what saved that. But the only reason that happened is because they could lose one engine and have a thrust to weight ratio of exactly 1.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was perfectly balanced. It wasn't going to fall back down to the ground. But what normally happens when rockets lose an engine right off the pad, their thrust to weight ratio is less than 1. So they just fall back to the pad, and it's very bad for the pad and very bad for the rocket. But Starship won't have that. Starship will be able to have engines out at liftoff and still perform its mission. How many? We don't know, because the specs of the engines and the number of engines keep changing. But obviously, as you said, Adrian, the later into the flight, the better.
Yeah, we also know the good thing about it happening later is always that you don't kill all your ground support equipment with the explosion. I think we saw it with an Antares explosion a few years ago, right? Where
Yes.
the Antares fell down to the launch, basically almost hit the launch pad on its way down again. Yeah.
And almost is such the key word for that one, because Northrop, then Orbital Sciences, got very lucky that Antares had just barely started to pitch enough downrange, partly thanks to the Baumgartner maneuver that it does to get away from the tower, where it kind of drifts like a car, like it drifts itself off to the side a little bit.
Yeah. Like the shuttle did.
Like the shuttle did, yeah. Different reasons, but exactly like the shuttle did. Yeah, the shuttle would push back, not quite vertical off the launch pad. Exactly. And that can have an added benefit of it gets you away from the pad footprint very, very quickly. That was the saving grace for Antares. It managed to miss a lot of the pad infrastructure, which was amazing. But yeah, those are all things. So yeah, Starship will be able to do it and handle engines out. Later on in the flight, the better.
Yeah.
I'm always admiring Chris B's ability to instant be there when shuttle is mentioned in the chat.
Oh, in the chat? Yes. Well, I mean, we have that command for a reason.
It was so fast. I was just impressed by that right now.
Okay, let's run through, get a little bit caught up on these super chats. Justin C, actually a new member, so thank you very much, Justin. All right. Gary Hislop says, still here, waiting for the premiere of Punky Booster 4, The Liftening. That's
Okay.
Punky Booster. I mean, that's good enough, but the the Liftening,
The
that's
lifting.
awesome.
I like that.
When
For those that don't
listening.
know, for the youngsters out there, Punky Brewster was a TV show in the
Yes,
80s.
it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that
Oh
was a
my
show
God,
I
the
used to
80s.
watch. That's the show where I learned why you shouldn't get inside refrigerators. They had an episode where
Oh.
one of the
Huh, yeah.
characters locked themselves inside a refrigerator. Now, it was like an old school refrigerator that has like the
That don't
latch
have the
door.
safety. Yeah, the safety things in
Yeah,
them.
like
Yeah.
nowadays, nowadays I think if you were inside a refrigerator, you just push out because like the doors are
Yeah.
magnetically stuck. But
Yeah.
back in the day, there were these latching things. Think about if you've ever worked in the restaurant industry, like the latch that gets you into the walk-in cooler or something. But anyway, yeah, that was how I learned. Oh, it's really dumb to go crawling inside refrigerators. That'll tell you how young I was. I needed a TV show to tell me that. Okay, continuing on.
Yeah. By the way, good side note in the chat. To be fair, a refrigerator saved Indiana Jones from a nuclear blast. So
Oh, is that right?
Let's not try any of this. NASA spaceflight
Yeah.
not responsible for.
Those-
Like,
Okay, another super chat from Demigod Dragon. British grilled cheese is in fact a thing, but it's cooked
Ooh.
open face on the oven on broil. Cooks the cheese and other toppings on top. Oh, okay, so it's like an open face sandwich.
Okay. All right. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank
Still
you.
not being grilled though, right?
so it's
Because
open
Right.
cycle.
it's being
So it's open
broiled.
cycle grilled cheese.
Yeah, there you go.
What I absolutely love about this is that's Canadian $5 giving us the answer for the British grilled cheese. So I love the fact that like the whole Commonwealth is trying to get involved here in answering this.
This is the crossover episode.
Yeah.
Right? It's a crossover episode.
Oh man, and let's see. Let's check on worker count here. We're back to a group meeting over on the right side there,
And
the right
They're at
side of the
least
left view.
Looking down again.
yeah. Like every time I look back up at this, they're all like rushing back to their view position, so I get happy thinking, "Oh, we might be close."
Yeah.
And then they go
Nope.
back for another conference. Yeah.
Yeah. Still same count, Adrian?
I have to admit that I
Oh boy.
don't know anymore.
Yeah.
That's always the worst when you miss the count at some point and then you're lost.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If y'all don't know, Adrian's main job is to count tiles on Starship. That's
No, not tiles.
No,
That's
that's
not
Ian. That's Ian.
That's
Oh,
Ian.
is that Ian? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh man.
Yeah,
I'm a
man,
fool.
and he finds that fun. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
that-
enjoys it.
I think my spreadsheet is way more like entertaining for me than counting tiles. So
Okay, back to the super chats. Jim Cavett just says thanks, y'all. Appreciate that. And then Miss Katya coming in again. No comment or question, just helping show some support. We appreciate that. Let's see. Greg Dietz says it looks like the quick disconnect arm has too low of elevation to fuel Starship. Camera angle, or is there another piece to put on top of the quick disconnect arm?
I think the answer to your question is both. Actually, I think it's a slight trick of the camera angle, but I think the camera angle is also showing us more or less where that arm will be. So, and I'm basing this on the bottom, basically on the. So if you look at the left-hand side of our screen where the booster base is on the orbital launch mount, on the exact opposite side that you can't see is a fueling system and like a fueling port that you can kind of see will just like reach out and connect to the end of Starship, and that's how the booster will be fueled. If that same thing is repeated on the arm up there, there is probably something else that needs to be added. If those devices are uniform, I cannot imagine why they would not be, because SpaceX likes to make things as uniform as possible and get rid of things that are different. I do think there's something else that does kind of need to be added to that arm, but also I will say that with a little bit of a caveat of not knowing how the arm retracts. I assume this is a swing arm, but not knowing if there's a part of it that would like pull back into the main part of the arm and then the arm swings out of the way. Like I can't say exactly how much is going to be needed, but I can definitely say I don't see a fueling port up there yet. So I think something else does have to be added.
Yeah. All right. Blazemonger says, while Elon would love to launch 420, as in Booster 4 and Ship 20, I could see B4 being mostly a Pathfinder by now, and B5 being the one that will launch. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, never say never. Never say never. I could very, very easily see a scenario where that ends up playing out. But just as easily, I think right now I'm sort of like sitting at 50-50 on that one, where I like, unless they really find something with this booster or something with 5 changes so much that they become more like, well, actually we get better data out of 5, then yeah, I could see them scrapping 4 or using 4 as just the ground test article. But I don't know. I think I'm 50-50 on whether or not it'll be 4 or 5 that flies it. Just yet.
Also, static fire is coming up. So someday.
Well, yes.
There is. I don't want to jinx it here, but there is a possibility that during like all engine static fire at some point maybe it RDs. Like it's a possibility. Just saying.
I mean, yeah, and my goodness, at that point, Booster 5 is the least of the concerns because you don't have a launch pad anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah. But like, I think that's a good thing, right? Because like, let's talk about that, because you're exactly right, Adrian. Right? Like, there is always the potential for that. Like, especially early on now, where this is still a developmental vehicle, and everything like that. They've also got to have a pretty high degree of confidence in the system to static fire at the orbital launch site when they only have one of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there has to be a high degree of like, yeah, it's a possibility, but it's probably a low enough percentage that it's a possibility, but the probability of it happening is low. That makes sense.
Yeah,
This kind of. Oh, go ahead.
It's kind of needed, right? That's the problem they have right now. They can only fire on the orbital launch pad because every other pad would just melt, and on the other side,
would melt.
There's a reason why they built this pad, and on the other side, you kind of want to at least once test your engines. Like they do it with Falcon 9 all the time, and with Falcon Heavy, that they static fire a rocket before they fly it, just to be sure that everything works, that everything is go. And it's a rock in a hard place.
Kind of leads me to a question of my own. Like, we see when they do static fires, they don't completely fill the tanks, right?
No, they do not.
Okay.
Normally.
Now, if they go,
no, wait a minute. On Starship, they don't. On Falcon 9, they do.
Right. Okay. Now, if they go for a 29 engine static fire, would they need to fill those tanks just to help hold it down? To assist the, I know it's got the hold down clamps, but like we see, like when they do a full duration Falcon 9 firing, like full duration, like flight duration of Falcon 9, they have to put an extra cap on it to hold it down, because once it's depleted the fuel, it becomes so light that the hold down clamps might not be able to hold it. So you get the nature of my question. Do we think that they would need to fill the booster up all the way just to add that extra weight and keep it from possibly breaking those hold down clamps?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I could foresee a couple different things here. One, maybe we're wrong and they're not going to go for a 29 engine all at the same time firing. Maybe they're going to go for a subset, and then if those are good, they do another subset, and then if those are good, they do another subset. Like, maybe that's a way to get around exactly the issue that you're talking about, Stephen.
Right.
Now, we have also seen them put weights, like added weights, on top of the other tests. Remember, like SN5 and SN6, I believe, had those little like square hats that would go on top of them to mimic the weight of a Starship on top of like the nose cone of a Starship. So there could be a mass simulator that goes on top of this to help as well. It's also possible that they have designed that pad to be able to hold on to it. But now let me actually circle back to your question, Steven. I think what it would ultimately come down to, and I needed to say all those other things to answer your question. I
Yeah.
think it'll come down to balance. What is the force that the clamp actually held, right? And what is that force based on the amount of mass propellant that we put into the vehicle and everything? If people want to feel the whole thing from a mass perspective, that they don't. Um, that's a fascinating question. I don't know, but that's what I would guess is it's going to come down to some sort of balancing act with that.
I think you need to repeat the last part because there was a bit of an audio problem there.
Oh,
But
my
you're good
apologies. Am I back now?
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
back
you're good now. It was like
Okay.
muffled there for a second.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I wonder what happened. Basically, that I think it's going to be a combination of a few different things about the mass of the propellant they put in there. What's the force that the hold down clamps can actually hold the vehicle to if all 29 are firing? Or some combination, or an added mass on top. I think some combination of all of those things is most likely what we would see, or the staggered test sequence that we sort of talked about a little bit.
There could
It's a
also be
great
the
question.
case.
Yeah.
There could also be the case that they only do a full 29 engine static fire when there's a Starship on top of it. That they don't do it in the maybe in a sub campaign where they only test the booster, but do like a full integration of the whole vehicle, and then with the Starship on top, basically being a mass simulator.
Right.
Then they do the full static fire because then there's a weight that is pushing against it.
And my goodness, that could be it. Gutsy, man, gutsy. If they do that for the first time, I foresee a situation, right, where we do get into like full stack static fires and things like that. But man, if they do that for the first time, kudos.
Yeah.
Well, Lucas G just slid a question in here that's sort of along the same lines, talking about thrust to weight ratio. Is there any other rocket flying today with the same thrust to weight ratio as Super Heavy, so we can have an idea of how fast it'll take off?
Oh
It's
gosh.
1.5, right?
It's 1 to 1.5 is the thrust to weight. 1.5 to 1 is the thrust to weight ratio. I do not, off the top of my head, know of another one. I think the Falcon is pretty close to that. But off the top of my head, I do not know what the thrust to weight ratios of each of any of the other rockets are off the top of my head. I am sorry. I can find that answer for you, and we can attempt to get that to you written or on another stream, but I really don't know the answer on that one off the top of my head.
We have some that go even faster.
We do. There are some with thrust to weight ratios much higher than that, like Minotaurs.
Yes. Oh man, I love Minotaur.
So
God,
insane.
yeah. Well, that's one of our there is a DOS emoticon of his face watching the first time he saw a Minotaur launch, and his face is just like, mouth open, like, just what did I just see on that one. But yeah, there are higher ones. Yeah, maybe that's a good thing we could do, is like have a list of like the rockets thrust to weight ratios at liftoff, so we can give good comparisons, so people have that visual. Because you're right, that is a really hard thing to visualize in your head, right? 1.5 to 1, but what does that translate to when it's coming off the pad? Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first, and I guess only Minotaur I've ever seen. It was a night launch, and not only did it shock me at how fast it got up and left, but as it was going up, as it was ascending, it was going through all these different colors. The exhaust would change colors as it was ascending, and I don't know if that's like it's burning through different parts of its propellant and it burns differently, or if it's an atmospheric thing. It was shortly after I moved here, I think, and I'd only seen a couple launches, so I wasn't 100% sure what I was seeing, but it's really beautiful.
It is, and I have a very embarrassing answer for a rocket with a similar thrust to weight ratio of 1.5 to 1.
I think I have the same answer.
That was the space shuttle's liftoff thrust to weight ratio. So the space shuttle, basically, look at how quickly the space shuttle lifts off its launch pad, and that's a 1.5 to 1 thrust to weight ratio. There you
I
go.
was just
Okay.
Googling on my right screen.
God.
And I
Well,
thought, like,
the only vehicle
big
off the
shuttle.
top of my head where I knew the liftoff mass and I knew the thrust was the shuttle. So I just did it on my phone and was like, oh, 1.5. Okay, there we go.
Which is
what about
fairly
Falcon
quick,
Heavy?
right?
Falcon Heavy should be in the same ballpark, right?
Yeah, I believe the Falcons are in the same ballpark as well, because they take off pretty quick as well. So yeah, the Falcon family, and the shuttle. Those are the applicable thrust to weight ratio equivalents if you want to go look at how quickly they leave the pad. Yeah.
And then you have Atlas, where it just depends.
Depends.
How
Yes.
many boosters does it have? Boosters? How many of them does it have? The 551 is awesome.
Yeah, I think that this was Brady and I one day got curious about the different timings for the Atlas variants, and I think it's like the Atlas with 5 solid rocket boosters clears the tower in like 3 seconds flat. The tower, and I mean the lightning towers, like the lightning system above the actual tower that you see. It can clear it in like 4 or 5 seconds with 5 solid rocket motors, and it's 14 seconds to clear it with a 401 no solid rocket motor variant.
Wow.
Like yeah, that is a vehicle where its liftoff thrust to weight ratio is just, whoo, good luck.
Yeah. And when it's got the 5 boosters on it, oh man, it's almost violent looking. Like it gets off the pad and kicks downrange so fast. It's just impressive.
And then you have Saturn V.
Which
it's taking
lumbered,
its
right?
time.
Yeah. Lumber is a good word for that.
Slowly
A
but surely.
heave off the launch pad, if you will.
Exactly.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah. Hey, I saw Apollo 13. It took like 30 seconds, but they were, they took some creative
30
license.
seconds.
It was forever, but they were doing different camera angles and stuff. Yeah.
That's really funny.
All right. Let's see. Fritz Hall has a question, and I like this question because some space fans, maybe already know this question, but if you're new to the subject, then this is a great question. Fritz Hall says, are launches always launched with a easterly trajectory?
No. We have a lot of launches that go to that trajectory because of the rotation of the Earth. But we have also polar launches, for example. We had a few from the Cape, which go to, as the name suggests, a polar orbit. That means they launch north or south to that direction. We also, I think, I'm not even sure which country it is, but there is a country that launches to the west, because to the east... Israel, thank you. I know there was this issue that they can't launch to the east because they would drop rocket stages in an area where it not really is preferable. But yeah.
AKA Iran and Iraq. Yeah.
And yeah, there is an advantage to launching east if you're going for equatorial trajectory. But in theory, if you can compensate it with more delta V, you can launch to west. It's possible.
Right.
And one thing on that oh, sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, could like Falcon 9 and Atlas, could they launch to the west?
Mm-hmm. They totally can. Orbit? Yeah, they totally can. From like theoretically, I mean, it's just a matter of like once you, in general, right? It's literally just a matter of once you're done with the vertical climb and you start the gravity turn, what's the compass heading that you pitch? Do you pitch 90 to go east? Do you pitch 45 to go northeast? 0 or 180 to go north or south, or do you pitch 180 or sorry, do you pitch 270 and go west? It's just a matter of that. But they can and they do. The Falcons, the Atlases have launched onto westerly retrograde. Dang it, you know what I mean. I'm not trying that again. Tracks out of Vandenberg and out of the Cape, because the sun synchronous orbits that you hear us talk about a lot on launches, where you're trying to put a satellite in a particular orbit so that each time it goes over the same point on Earth's surface, it's the same sunlight and sun angle conditions, so you can very easily compare images. Those are technically retrograde orbits because they're 96, 97 degrees inclination, so you've gone past true polar. at that point,
Right.
and you are slightly retrograde. They can do it. The only thing that really, and this is a huge stressing point, that really, really affects the vehicles when they go retrograde is not only do you now have to nullify Earth's rotation, that gain that you get because you're traveling east with Earth's rotation, you not only have to counter that to begin with, you then have to then accelerate once you counter it all the way to orbital velocity. So it's huge performance hits in terms of the mass of the payload that can be brought to orbit when you go retrograde. That's the biggest thing.
It's one of the great things for which is Kerbal great for, to visualize it for a person better. Because if you,
Oh my God,
for
no.
example, with your launch in Kerbal, I think everybody does that at the beginning, where you just launch straight up with the first rocket you build. And if you launch high enough, you notice that the Earth is rotating away from you, below you. And
Yeah.
that is a great way to get a sense of what effect that has on rockets.
It really is, and like I'll say this to you for Kerbal Space Program as well. If you have if you have some of the add-ons, right, that can tell you how much delta V, the velocity change that you need to reach a certain orbit, you can actually test this and see how the various inclinations affect you. Like if you start in Florida at the Cape and you go due east, it's something like just barely over 8,000 meters per second is the delta V that you need to obtain a low Earth orbit. But when you increase that to the space station's inclination of 51.6 degrees, now all of a sudden you need 8,700 meters per second instead of 8,000. And when you go polar, now you're into like the 9,500 to 10,000 meter per second range, just to achieve orbit with your particular payload. And that's using a payload of the same mass, right? Because your payload mass affects the delta V that you need. But it is significant to get retrograde. Yeah.
All right, interesting. Let's see. David Spector has two questions. Why are they removing the booster? And since they only have a limited number of road closures per year, why not do all the moves at night when no one is heading to the beach?
Okay, I can start with the first one if you want.
That's perfect because I can take the second one.
Wonderful. The first one, we have no official confirmation why they're removing it, but the current ongoing speculation is that they will remove it so they have the space to install the chopstick mechanisms on Mechazilla on the tower. So that's the current speculation, which is also supported by the fact that the stand is next to that, so they couldn't put it on the stand, and then they have the area cleared, install the chopsticks. But yeah, we don't know for sure, but that is what we think.
And as to the roll for the road closures and everything, a lot of times you don't want to roll large things like this at night. You want very good lighting conditions. You want to be able to see everything that's happening. You want your technicians who are out there walking with it to have good situational awareness. And while you can get that at the production site and the launch site because of the lights that they have there, you can't really get that along the road. So it's never a never that they would roll at night, but it's a safety thing for why they roll during the day with these massive things like boosters and ships and tanks. But nothing technically that would prevent them from rolling at night.
Right.
Also, just everything isn't ready at the same time, and they have a limited number of transporters, so you sometimes just can't wait to haul 7 things out there because each of those things requires 2 transporters, and you may only have 6. You know, something like that. Like those numbers are not to be taken as gospel. Just examples. Yeah.
Also, you then run into the issue that you have space occupied at the build site by these things you build that maybe prevent you there from building another thing that you need to build there. Also, you have workers maybe over at the launch site who are waiting for that exactly part that you want to move. So it's not that easy to just wait for everything to be ready and then ship it in one go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Tarek S. coming in with a question. Do you think that SpaceX will test hover and moving B4 and S20 over the water when they return as part of the testing?
I would
So, like for the orbital flight.
Yeah, basically do the landing profile as if they were in the spot where they would land, I guess.
That's my understanding of what the flight
Yeah.
profile is. Yeah, it's
Then
basically like
absolutely.
if they both survive to that point, they will basically think that they're landing, but there's no arm to catch them.
Yeah.
Then
It'll
I
be
absolutely think that they will do that, because I think that's the main point why they are not landing where the landing mechanism is right now, because they want to basically make a dry test without landing mechanisms of the whole sequence.
And that is exactly what they did for the Falcon 9. So it would not in any way surprise me to see them replicate that, where they were trying to soft land the Falcon 9s in the ocean before they even attempted to land them on the drone ships. And then the drone ships are what led to the like how not to land an orbital class rocket video, which I still think is one of the best videos a space company has put out. I'm just like, here's how we failed. I love it. Here's how it didn't go to plan. But yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me that they would do that with the boosters and the ships as well, until they can get comfortable enough with, yeah, they can start coming back to the towers. And that's why they'll have two, because the first time we do that might not work.
Might not.
Might need another tower after we're done with it the first time. But yeah, I mean, all joking aside, yeah, there are going to be a few. I would gather that there are probably going to be a few of those like ocean landing attempts that aren't really landings, but tests for the landing sequence.
Also, you want to make sure you get it right before you risk bringing it in a little too close to that the GSE tank farm over there.
Oh, there's a lot you want to miss. Let me put it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But if there's one thing you particularly want to miss, it's more methane.
Yes, and actually, thank you, because that is tangential to what I was actually wanting to say there, which is a good thing to remember though when we talk about this and we talk about like the danger to the equipment, right? There's very, very little propellant left in these vehicles when they come back. So you are not talking about like a fully fueled vehicle blowing up when it hits the tower. You are talking about, I mean, like still enough to cause problems, but not probably enough that you take out the entirety of the launch site unless you had like a really bad day or like we're really unfortunately off course somewhere, you know?
Yeah. Musical Wolves playing off of the best part is no part saying, said, does this mean the best booster is no booster?
Don't give Elon ideas.
Well, as I have said multiple times, when people ask, well, what are they going to do next after Starship? And I go, warp drive.
Yeah.
I mean, the best booster is no booster. Warp drive.
Hasn't Gwen talked about that some? Like she envisions sometime in the future, you know, thinking not so much about interplanetary travel, but like
interstellar travel.
Interstellar travel, yeah.
Well, I mean, after interplanetary travel in our own solar system, that would be next.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I would argue I'm a fan of working on multiple things at the same time. I would argue let's not get ahead of ourselves too much.
Right. yeah. And don't get me wrong. She did not say that they're working on warp drive. Don't take that the wrong way, y'all.
Yeah. Well, when you said, didn't she say that? I was like, oh, Steven. Please clarify what you mean. Like,
yeah. No, I've heard her talk about her excitement about that sort of stuff, but no, she is, as far as I know, never implied that they're working on warp drive.
Right.
I think we have a long way to go in. I don't know.
NASA's kind of working on it. Like people are working on faster than light drives. It's
really?
Not like yeah. I mean, like in theoretical concepts and what things could look like. Yeah. I mean, nothing like, and we'll have it tomorrow for the Enterprise. Like nothing like that. But like they are working on the concepts of it and how it could work and the theories behind it and the theories that are telling you no it couldn't, maybe it could, depending on how it works. Yeah, I mean people are working on that and looking at ways for how faster than light travel could be possible, but like we're not at like oh my god we're almost there breakthrough. We are nowhere close to that, but doesn't mean we're not thinking about it and working on it.
All right. Let me see. This is from Matt. Is an N1L5 Soviet lunar rocket booster repeat possible? Near nuclear disaster,
Oh.
1969. Yeah, fill me
Okay,
in.
yep. Yeah, so I know what they're talking about. Adrian, did you want to start this one? I heard you start to say something.
No,
I don't
no,
want to
no.
skip over
Go
you.
ahead. Do you start?
Okay. Okay, the question is basically asking, will Starship become another version of the Soviet N-1 rocket? So as it stands right now, the N-1 rocket is the rocket in the world that flew with the most number of engines. At 31, I believe, was the number of first stage engines on. No, it had an even number, so 30 or 32, on the first stage. But anyway, uh, it never flew successfully. It lifted off a few times and came crashing back down epically because there were a lot of really not good engineering design choices that were made. The engines weren't really what they should have been for that vehicle. Yeah, how close some of those disasters came with the N1. Yeah, no, the Starship isn't going to be that. Right now the vehicle with the most engines that has ever flown successfully is the Falcon 9 with 27. So SpaceX has a really good track record, and the Raptor engines are nowhere close to the non-reliability of the N1 rocket engines that were used on that one. So I totally hear what you're saying with the boosters and like how big they are, how much propellant they have, like if they were to actually explode, like how bad would this be? Because sometimes rockets carry enough fuel where they like we say like they can explode with the force of a small nuclear bomb. And I don't think so on this one. The technology has improved immensely since the 60s with the N1, and the N1 was just a troubled rocket to begin with. And in all honesty, they never should have hit the launch button on that thing. There was so much testing that really needed to happen before they did it. But it was a space race, and they needed to try to beat us, and it didn't work. But I personally would not draw any conclusions, or sorry, not conclusions, any comparisons between Starship and the N1. I just think that the systems are too different. The technology is too different for a direct comparison there. Even though the engine number is very similar, and Starship will eventually exceed that.
Also, it's 30 engines, by the way. It had
30.
30
Thank you. It was 30. Okay, good. As soon as I said 31, I was like, nope, it was even, because the plan was, this was the other ridiculous thing of how this rocket worked on the N1. If one engine failed, the corresponding one on the opposite side had to be shut down to maintain thrust balance. So if you lost one engine, you automatically had to shut down another good engine, just to keep the thing from tipping over. So yeah, personally, I mean the N1. I mean, man, there's so much to read there, the historical element of it. But yeah, I personally, it's a good question. I wouldn't make any connections to the N1 Starship though.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is coming to our attention that we are getting dangerously close to our NSF Live show,
Of which I'm one of the people on it.
right. And now don't go anywhere, because this lift could literally happen as we're speaking. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of clear out some of these last few questions and super chats, and then we're going to take a break to maybe grab something to eat. I'll have all the time in the world because I'm not going to be on NSF Live this week, but we do have a good guest for you. John Krause is going to be there talking about covering the Inspiration 4 mission as the official photographer, which is super cool. He's a good friend of a lot of us around here on the Space Coast. It is really cool that he had an opportunity like that, and I think that y'all are going to want to watch this show, because from what I understand, we're going to be showing some of his photos that he got, and kind of talking about the story behind those and stuff like that, and hopefully the experience of the whole thing. So I'm looking forward to it. I will be listening, but what we're going to do right now is kind of go through these last few super chats. We've got Gareth Parker coming in with some support. We've got a couple new members. Jason Sorrell is a new member. Welcome aboard. And Des Nichols And as well, Monty Hughes is another new member. And we have Paulus Plain, another one for new NASA spaceflight European dude. Last funny question to ask. Are you a Roman Empire German or a barbarian German, the Rhine River border?
I'm on the side of the barbarian Germans. I'm on the part of the Rhine where the barbarians lived in the times of the Roman Empire.
Right. Okay. Well, cool. Let's see. Clay Michael, maybe, I think. Will launches be visible from Corpus Christi or San Antonio? It's Corpus Christi.
Corpus
I think
Christi,
so.
almost with a certainty, yes. With the caveat, obviously, cloud cover. But oh my gosh, yeah, Corpus Christi, definitely. San Antonio, how far away is San Antonio from?
San Antonio is what, like kind of like right in the middle of Texas, right?
Yeah, which is why I'm trying to pull it up on a map to. Come on. It's just literally a matter of how fast my fingers can go here. Okay, San Antonio is roughly
Drum roll.
251 miles or 404 kilometers away.
A little far.
Depends.
With cloud cover,
And
yeah.
of course
Because that's
going. Well, but it's also going away from you from
Right.
San Antonio, so depends. Depends.
Yeah. I'm
Give it a
thinking
try.
about like
Yeah.
people in Tampa sometimes can see the launches, but from here they
Yep.
go northeast and not always directly away from you.
Yeah, and
Sometimes
like
they do,
Miami
but-
can sometimes see launches going up to the space station. So try, but don't be disappointed if you can't. But try.
Yeah, worth a look. And if you live there and you can't make it all the way to the launch site, maybe just kind of take a day and drive a couple hours towards it or something. You know what I mean? Like get as
Yeah.
close as you can. Yeah. I mean, always cool to see a rocket launch, no matter what it is. Let's see. Musical Wolves coming in saying it's being removed since the best booster is no booster. Thank you.
It's being
That's
yeah.
okay. I think they're clarifying because I didn't get their joke before. Yeah, the fact that it's being lifted off the orbital launch mount is apparently an indication that the best booster is no booster. I get it. I get you now, Musical Wolves. Thank you. All right, let's see. Paul Tompkins saying catch arms aren't needed for the first flight, so EM wouldn't have fitted them now, or wouldn't have them fitted now. Suggests B4 gets its engine, skirt, and COPV covers fitted in high bay.
I mean,
These are
we
just
don't know.
ideas they're throwing out.
Silly question. Is it going back to the production site? I just sort of envisioned they're just putting it on one of the transporters while they put the arms on, and it's going to stay there. Now, I could be wrong, but I didn't actually think the booster was leaving the pad. I just kind of thought it was getting taken off the mount.
Yeah, that's my assumption anyway.
Because the next road
Same
closure
here.
isn't until Monday, so I don't actually think it's leaving the launch site though. So I think those things would be put on either when it's on the ground or when they get it back on the stand.
Right.
And man, I'll give you COPV covers. There's a part of me that I'm gonna hold off on skirt.
Yeah, it seems like there's not going to be one. It's just extra weight. If you don't need it, it's just extra weight, right?
And that's exactly my thought process. If you don't end up needing it, but again, I don't know if they do need it or not. But COPV covers, yes. I'm not willing to go as far as skirt on that one. Yeah.
The best skirt is no.
Don't. Moving on.
Okay, well, I have reached the end of our super chat queue, and I think what the plan is to get everybody fed before they need to be on NSF Live. But speaking of Starbase Live, this will continue. These views will continue as they always do, 24/7. So whenever we end this, I think we're gonna kick you over there, and if I don't know, if for some reason that doesn't work, well, you know the channel. You got to subscribe to it, And Starbase Live is running all the time. And yeah, let's go around the horn here. I have been your quote-unquote host, reading questions and super chats and whatnot. I'm Stephen Marr. I am a photographer for NASA Spaceflight based over here on the Space Coast. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm spacecoast_STVE. And also with me, I've had our assistant managing editor, Chris Gebhardt, over there.
My pleasure. See you guys soon.
And you can also follow him. It is Chris G_NSF. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. Indeed.
All right. And then also we've had our writer and what's the name? Spreadsheet wizard over here, Adrian Beal.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And give out your Twitter because I don't know it off the top of my head.
It's at BC Car Counters.
All right.
With an S at the end.
And then behind the scenes, we've had Michael Baylor producing for us, switching cameras and helping us out the way he does. And he is Next Space Flight on Twitter. All right. And so I think with that, don't forget at the, what do you say, the top of the hour is NSF Live?
Top of the hour. 45
top
minutes,
of the hour.
NSF Live.
Because it's going to depend on what time zone you're in, but about 45 minutes from now. But in the meantime, we're just going to kick you straight on over to Starbase Live. So we appreciate y'all being here and appreciate the support and hanging out and everything. And we'll see y'all on the other side.